I'm ready.
Okay, Valeria, your turn.
Everyone is here?
Everyone is here. Professor Levialdi, the Vice President of the university, is here. Nathan, I leave you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gustavo. First of all, I would like to thank the Israel ambassador in Italy, Dror Eydar, and Gustavo Piga for organizing online lecture series. The social and technological change and the innovation lessons and challenges learned from Israel's unique technological experience are the main theme of these lectures, planned by Israel Embassy and the University of Rome Tor Vergata. In these lectures that will take place from today until February 22, we will have the opportunity to share information and experiences with Israel's ambassadors in Italy and executives of Israeli public and private companies. I think this is a great opportunity for all students. Israel is one of the top countries for technological expertise in the world. It is steadily at the top of international rankings and reports, such as the World Intellectual Property Organization Global Innovation Index and World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report. The last global startup ecosystem report by Startup Genome included Tel Aviv among the 6 cities identified as tech hubs after Silicon Valley. Israel is home of the highest number of startups per capita in the world, 1 startup per 1,400 people. It is also home to the highest number of engineers per capita and has the world's second highest research and development expenditure rate, more than 4% of its gross domestic product. Israel contributes to worldwide technological progress with sophisticated applied knowledge in different research areas: cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, big data, medtech, agritech, and many others. Within the framework of Agreement on Industrial, Scientific, and Technological Research and Development Cooperation, Israel and Italy cooperate in many joint research projects. We cooperate in the important areas of medicine, biotechnologies, public health, and hospital organization. We cooperate in the areas of agriculture and food science, in the application of information technology to education and scientific research, in the space and Earth observation area, and many more areas. The Global Governance online lectures series are an opportunity today to strengthen our cooperation and to improve our understanding of the social and technological global changes. I'd like to leave you with the words of Israel's former president, Shimon Peres. In Israel, a land lacking in natural resources, we learned to appreciate our greatest national advantage, our minds. Through creativity and innovation, we transformed barren desert into flourishing fields and pioneering new frontiers in science and technology. I think this is a very important lesson for all of us, and especially for our students. Thank you very much again. And now I give the floor to Ariel Berkovich for starting this important event of today. Thank you very much again.
Hi, buongiorno. I will speak in English for you. I'm Ariel Berkovich. I'm in charge of the Public Diplomacy Department here in the embassy. In a moment, I will introduce the ambassador, but first I want to thank you, Professor Levialdi and Professor Piga, and the students that are here for this event. It's an honor for us to be present and to do this great project with you. A project that really was born specifically because the previous talk that the ambassador gave in the framework of the Diplomacy Festival, but more broadly because just of the great relationship that the embassy has with the Tor Vergata University, with which we feel friends and close, and we like to work with you and to continue doing these great projects. The idea of this series is really to put in a way Israel on the table and to look at it from some angles as an interesting case to study. So it's a way to look at Israel from many angles, because Fortunately or unfortunately, Israel is for the last years a place that it's the center of many things, many movements, transitions, a lot of energy. So it's always interesting to have a look at it, to understand a little bit more through Israel what's going on in the Middle East and also sometimes in the world. So the spirit of these talks and the way they were built is in a way to try to update the map. We see that the Middle East is changing completely these last decades, and we believe that in order to understand the world, you need to understand that area. And for us, you know, technology, energy, health, social issues, geopolitics, it's all a whole. You cannot untangle one from the other. So we hope that with these talks, we will provide you, the students, some keys to understand this interesting area and specifically what's going on in Israel. Israel and Italy are good friends, and we believe that we have a lot in common and a lot to share. So our motto here is that we should prepare together for the future. And to be prepared for the future, we need to see what's changing and to be prepared for it. So I really hope that you will enjoy the talks. All the speakers are very high level, and I think we will learn from them a lot, me myself too. And they will all be open to answer questions after the talk. So take that opportunity. I think that in these days, it's crucial to understand what's going on. And as I said, this is a good opportunity. To conclude, I will say that the ambassador today, the ambassador Dror will speak about the new paradigms in the Middle East. And I think that I just want to wish you an interesting lecture, and I will pass the floor to the ambassador. Thank you very much.
Thank you, grazie Ariel. Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank to Professor Piga, head of the program in global governance, and to the Vice Rector, Professor Levialdi, for the invitation. It is a privilege to be here today. I think that this is my third lecture in Tor Vergata. One was about the Talmud, and the other was in the Festival of Diplomacy. And now, and I hope that we'll continue in it, Tor Vergata, this is a long-standing relationship between Tor Vergata University and Israeli universities, and many brilliant Israeli scholars had the opportunity to share their contribution in lectures, join projects, and maintain the fruitful relations of exchange with this university and its community. And I hope to continue with it. This series of talk, as we heard, is part of this fruitful cooperation, and I hope to provide a fresh perspective on an old topic. So I want to share also the screen. I hope that it will help me do it. Do you see the shared screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I try to read and change, and I hope that everything will be fine. And actually, I'm very glad to be at least virtually in university, because I feel at home, and most of my intellectual life I spent within universities. So in this lecture, I'm wearing two hats. First, as the ambassador of Israel, that is the representative of a political entity that is a main player in the Middle East game board. But in addition, I'm here as a person who has reflected and analyzed the Middle East for many years. Therefore, today I'm not only bringing you facts and figures, but I will also try to put forward a broader overview and underline some patterns in the history of the area. Maybe it will even provide you some new keys to understand this spatial area, which has been a subject of discussion for so many years. So I hope that we will have also a place for one, two question at the end. And if not, we'll have another time. What do we know about the Middle East? Seemingly a lot. Europe and the Western civilization maintain a deep and complex relationship with that region, which during the last 150 years has been known as the Middle East. Even when I say Europe, it is another generalization. There is a difference between Eastern and Western Europe and between the countries of Northern and Southern Europe. You can look at the map. Let's see if it works. It doesn't work. One moment. Right. Oh, so this is the Middle East. And you can see also the Middle East and Europe. So you can look at the map and see that Italy is unique. A vast part of its extension is immersed in the sea. From Puglia or Sicily, the distance is very short to ancient Greece and Troy, which are Greece and Turkey of today, and the same about ancient Carthage or Tunisia, Libya, and the rest of North Africa today. The ancient Romans very quickly came to control much of what is today the Middle East. This is the cradle. The Middle East is the cradle of human civilization. Great cultures grew up in it, huge empires that once dominated incredible vast areas, even without the communication means available to us today. The three great religions that shape our world today, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, grew up there. Of the ancient peoples of the region, the only ones who survived the test of time are the Jews. We saw them all passing by. We too were gone for a moment, 2,000 years, but we are here. We were exiled from our country after the second destruction in the year 70 AD. Since then, the ancient world has gone, and it seemed that this should have been our fate too. But no, from the mist of time, we have made our way back into history. At first, we stood up as a national movement, Zionism, and then we returned home to our ancient homeland, which we never stopped dreaming, praying, and talking about. We renewed our existence in our home as before. This return of the Jews to history seemed inconceivable, or in the renowned British historian Arnold Toynbee words, it seemed like a fossil that had come back to life. That is it, an abnormal phenomenon. Not in a positive way, he said it, but it took more than 2 decades for him, to realize that in fact, he did not fully understand the phenomenon of the Jewish people and the Zionist movement in Israel. All the other biblical civilizations, including those from the Roman period, have disappeared and are gone. The rulers of that area were empires who ruled over ancient social structures that have existed for generations. We're speaking about extended family, hamulas in Arabic, religious denomination or clans, and of course tribes and ethnic groups. This can be seen in a document that is available to all of us, just to read it, the Bible. There are cornerstones of the region. These are the cornerstone of the region, whom which anyone trying to understand must take into account. Extended families, ethnic groups, and tribes, more than state. It is not my intention to review thousands of years of history. The Middle East, as we know it today, is the result of the last 100 years of history. During the First World War, the Ottoman Empire collapsed and its territories fell on the hand of the victorious powers at the time. One of them was Italy. The Paris Agreement in 1919 dealt with the division of Europe and set its borders, but failed to deal with the territories of the Middle East. To this purpose, the winning parties gathered again in April 1920, this time in northern Italy at San Remo, where they proceeded to divide the Middle East. About 99% were given to the Arab people and about 1% to the Jewish people. For the first time in history, after about 1,850 years, the world recognized the historical rights of the Jewish people to its ancient land and anchored it in a treaty, an agreement. This is the most significant legal milestone in regard to the status of the land. That is the international law. In fact, if you hear otherwise, sometimes tell them the facts. So this is the map of the mandate that was given also to Britain, Great Britain. Britain and France were given mandates over large parts of the Middle East to help the peoples of the region to converge and eventually establish modern states there. This is an important point. About a century ago, Europe and the Western civilization gave the people of the region a gift, the idea of a nation state. In such an entity, minorities live together and equal civil rights are granted to all. Freedom of expression, etc., etc. The state is a strong structure, so it was worthwhile for them, for the tribes, for the families, to compromise some of their identity and live together in order to gain an economic prosperity and personal security. This is how various Arab states were born. We will skip about 90 years to the so-called Arab Spring, and there were quite a lot of Western observers who were convinced that this was a revolution similar to the European Revolution, such as the spring of 1848 or even the French Revolution. Was it? In February 2011, almost 10 years ago, in the midst of the riots in Egypt, journalist Thomas Friedman from the New York Times walked around Tahrir Square. This is Tahrir Square in the heart of Cairo, and enthusiastically declared that, I quote, "What we have witnessed in Egypt today is the real decolonization of this country. That is after the decolonization, that is after the British left Egypt, the country was ruled by an incompetent king, and then since 1952, by a stifling top-down military dictatorship. For the first time in modern history," continued Friedman, "Egypt is truly in the hands of its own people." End of quote. Friedman said that from now on, the Arab world will have two spiritual centers, a religious one in Mecca, to which Muslims will make a pilgrimage to be close to God, and Tahrir Square, where people will come to touch freedom. According to Friedman, the coup in Egypt, the revolt, the riots, had nothing to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. I quote again, indeed, what makes the uprising here so impressive and in that sense so dangerous to other autocracies in the region is precisely the fact that it is not owned by and was not inspired by the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, just a week, not 10 years, 1 week after the publication of his report, Postcard from Cairo, you can find it in the internet, in the same square itself, in front of more than 2 million demonstrators, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the Muslim Brotherhood leader who returned from exile, gave a speech. He was not a regular, it wasn't a regular speech. He was the keynote speaker. This is the same Qaradawi that is considered today the supreme judicial authority in the Muslim world. The same Qaradawi that has repeatedly expressed support for the suicide bombing against Israel and the attacks on the American troops in Iraq. Earlier, he had published a fatwa. Fatwa is like a religious rule in which he included the following message. I'm quoting, Constantinople was conquered in 1453 by the Ottoman Muhammad ibn Murad. And now it is the turn for the other city. What is the other city that wasn't conquered? The turn of Rome, Roma. We hope for it and we believe in it. The Islam will return to Europe once again as a conqueror after being expelled from it twice. I believe, said Qaradawi, that this time the conquest of Europe will not be through the sword, but through the preaching and spread of Islamic ideology until it includes both the East and the West. End of quotes. I want to stress that I'm speaking about the political Islam and not the religion of Islam. So Constantinople, that Qaradawi was speaking about, was the capital of Eastern Christianity. I think personally of Emperor Constantine every time I pass by the Triumph Arch, Arco di Constantinos, that he erected in memory of his victory at Ponte Milvio in the year 312. About 1,100 years later, Constantinople disappeared in the dust of the Ottoman army and became Istanbul, the city that we know until today. Rome remained unconquered, not only as the capital of Italy, but as the capital of Christian civilization. By the way, a similar destiny befell also on Jerusalem. The Muslim Brotherhood did not content itself with demonstrations and speeches only. For a time, they took over Egypt with Muhammad Morsi as the president until they were overthrown by the military elite, Egyptian military elite, led by Muhammad Assisi, who is the president of Egypt today. What then was the reason for Friedman's blindness? Not only Friedman as a parable, I'm speaking about many observers, beyond his desire to paint the violent riots in a color of hope, in a romantic way. Friedman is read by tens of millions, but the Iraqi journalist, for example, Jaber Habib Jaber, is less read, but he surely knows much more. He wrote at the same time, I quote, listen, regarding the Muslim Brotherhood, it seems to me that staying in the back, that is why we didn't see members of the Muslim Brotherhood in the riots. He said that staying in the back was a carefully considered move by the Muslim Brotherhood rather than a result of a movement weakness or a procrastination. The Muslim Brotherhood used a taqiyya. Taqiyya in Arabic is like a camouflage. It was a wise move to avoid Western intervention against the revolution by arguing that it is being pushed by Islamists and that it would become a movement similar to the Iranian Revolution. So they were hiding. The taqiyya, by the way, that Jaber is talking about is the duty of care, duty of caution that allows the Muslim believer to hide his identity in order to survive under hostile rule. For example, the members of the brothers received a permission to shave their beards so they would not be identified by the Mubarak regime. Maybe that is why Friedman did not recognize them, even though they were all around him in Tahrir Square. I'm saying it because when we want to analyze the Middle East, we need to understand also its culture, its behavior, and what is beneath. And also, it's very good to know the language. So the Facebook revolution did not succeed. Now we know it, 10 years later. The riots moved to other areas, countries of the Middle East very quickly. Right now, Syria suffers from a civil war in which more than 600,000 people, men, women, and children have been killed so far. More than 11 million refugees. Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, many others are also in turmoil. The historian needs the distance of time to see the full picture. We need more than 1 decade. We need maybe 100 years. But even now, if we look at what emerged from the events of the last decade, this is what we see. The collapse of the Arab nation state, meaning the collapse of the Western national ideal that Europe tried to install in the peoples of the Middle East. This is Qaradawi, I forgot. And this is the conquer of the Ottoman Empire of Constantinople. And this is the Ark of Constantine. Sorry, I forgot. And this is also a square. And this is what happens in Syria. Okay. Looking at the policy statement of the EU and also of most European governments with regard to the Middle East, we understand that European politicians want the region to calm down in order to bring the situation back to the eve of the Arab Spring. They still use the old paradigm according to which the focus of the problem in this area is actually the existence of Israel, which is both a Western and a Jewish state in the heart of an Eastern and Muslim area. So Thomas Friedman is not alone. It is only an example. And this is an expression of the thought that, if taken to the limit, will bring us to what I called in my article Lennonism, named after John Lennon, famous song Imagine. Imagine a world where there are no religions or states, nor property or greed, a world without borders where everyone lives in harmony and peace. We wish, but we understand that reality is different. Even in ancient Jewish tradition, there is such a vision of world peace, a vision that was predicted in the 8th century before Christ in Jerusalem by prophet Isaiah. I quote from the Bible, his vision. The wolf shall live with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And another quote from Isaiah, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Very a beautiful vision. The last verse, by the way, is engraved at the entrance of the United Nations building. Oh, where is it? Forgot it. Okay. Unlike John Lennon, this vision is not about erasing the different culture and eliminating national differences. The Bible does not speak about erasing this different culture and eliminating national differences, but about coming to terms with the amazing mosaic of humanity. The Bible teaches us also the value of the long historical process. The Jewish tradition, as reflected in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, speaks less about revolution and more about evolution, less about uprisings and more about the slow development of all humanity towards a more moral world reality. So the Middle East is changing right before our eyes with regards to all assumptions that characterize the Western attitude towards it. The idea of the nation state was to unite minorities to create a modern state. A state is a strong body and it can give more security to the various minorities within it and more economic options. In Syria, for example, Sunnis, Shiites, Christians, Druze, Alawites, Kurds, and other minorities have united into one state. This was also the case in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Libya. The assembled minorities were rivals to each other and often even enemies. These ethnic groups were also not homogeneous. They included tribes and clans that were hostile to each other to the point of bloodshed. And here came Europe and put on a new cloth in the name of the modern nation state. But what held all these groups together? Did they have a shared vision, shared values, shared history, a common religion, civil democracy? Something. What held all of them together? What held Syria was Assad, the father, now Assad, the son. And what held Iraq was Saddam Hussein, and in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, and so on. Individual rulers who controlled the armies and imposed a regime of terror without civil rights. From a Western perspective, these were dictatorships. Along with the removal of these cruel rulers, also the idea of a nation state collapsed. Amid the ruins, the ancient primordial structures that have characterized this area re-emerged. Tribes, religious denominations and clans, and extended families. This is, for example, all the tribes in Iraq. Look how many are there. Every Arab country has many tribes in it. This is Yemen. Look how many tribes. So perhaps we are on the brink of another era, the post-Arab nation state and the reorganization of people's relations in the region. Much of the Middle East is covered by desert. Look how big is the desert in the Middle East. You see all these in Africa, you see the Arab, Saudi Arabia, even Israel, half of Israel is a desert. So first and foremost, the struggle for life and death is a struggle for water resources. This is how you survive in this difficult place. In the struggle over water sources, the dominant group is the extended family, Hamula, whose glue between the parts is based on blood ties. For thousands of years, a culture has developed with its own laws and traditions. About 1400 years ago, Islam came and sought to change the ancient traditions. For example, blood revenge. Islam does not allow blood revenge, but we know that blood revenge is existing. So, etc. Since then, there has been tension between the tribal tradition and the Islamic tradition. In modern times, the modern state has also joined with its own laws. Now, the dual tension between Islam and a tribal tradition has become a triangle. The ancient traditions versus the tradition of Islam versus the law of the modern state. In any case, the important point for our discussion is that in the Middle East, the point of reference of the individual are these basic structures of the region. For example, his tribal identity, and not the identity of the state. Only after that, the identity issue shifts to religion, and in this case also to the significant differences between the Sunnah and the Shia and the state at last. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why throughout history there has often been a superstructure in the form of an empire that ruled over all this colorful conglomerate. There were no state during the history. There were more ethnic groups, tribes, etc., etc. We have to understand it. It's a Western idea that was given to the Middle East. Israel is exceptional, but we are speaking about the whole region. Here is a question that if we understand this, the question I think that anyone who seeks to understand the Middle East must address is, who decided that what is appropriate for Europe and Western civilization is also appropriate for the Middle East? I mean, from a perspective of political structures. What's wrong with this basic structure that held the region for many years? Why do we need to establish nation states there? It's a question that we have to think about it. Because did the nation state bring prosperity to the region? Did they bring freedom of expression? Did they bring science? Did they bring freedom of religion? Did they bring civil rights? This nation state? Nothing. So why do you think that our ideas in the West are appropriate also necessarily for the Middle East? Think about George Bush, the son that invaded Iraq, an area of 5,000 years of civilization, and wants to educate them to be democratic. They don't want. It is true that in Europe too, there were tribes and extended families and ancient cultural tradition, and of course religion, wars of religions, etc., etc. But in the last 1,000 years, Europe has undergone a profound process of change. From the Middle Ages through the Protestant Revolution in Christianity, and the Renaissance through the secular revolution, and the French Revolution and the separation of church from the state, to the scientific revolution of the 19th century, and also the world wars that change also the perspective of the Western civilization and the thought of school of thought. So ancient social structure were weakened in Europe by new forms that became increasingly dominant. None of these almost touched the Muslim world, at least none in a way that has brought about a fundamental change in its world views. We have to understand it. And we need to have what I called in my articles humility, humble in front of history, not to force, to be patient, to let the forces inside the region to do their process. The difference between Europe and the Arab world is 1,000 years of changing. And another significant difference also, the attitude to history. In the Middle East, the past is not just a matter of memory. And time is not just a linear matter. See the difference? I mean, I think that Dali, maybe, I don't know if he knew, but this is how in the Middle East they refer to time. It's a flexible entity. Time is not a linear, is not just a linear matter, an event that follows another event. In ancient societies, the significance of various deeds depended on the ability to reconstruct a mythical model made at the dawn of history. A person of this society did not recognize deeds that had not been done and had not been experienced before by the gods or ancestors. Everything he did in the present has been done in the past. It's not the ethos of modernity to invent new things. No. Everything he did in the present has been done in the past. Thus, his life was a constant repetition of gestures which were first made by others. The repetition of the primordial acts help a person to overcome the linearity of time, that is the horror of death. Nothing really passes, but we repeat in our lives ancient patterns that have already happened. Thus, we entered to eternity. The attitude to time in pre-modern or conservative culture, and in our case in the Middle East, is not only an interesting anthropological fact, but a central element in their political and social behavior. By the way, think about the difference in, we spoke about Sanremo Festival, Sanremo. A song in the Eurovision Song Contest is lasting about 3 minutes. In a traditional Arab music, a beautiful one, I recommend you to listen, but the introduction of a song, only the introduction is 10 minutes. The whole song might be 30 minutes. So it's a different way of thinking of time. And of course, time is a central element in their political and social behavior. It grants the ancient traditions a central role and makes them a relevant factor, sometimes even more so than current events, which are in fact nothing but topical expressions of ancient patterns present here and now and affecting the present. In other words, history is not what once happened, but is present in the here and now and direct the present. It's very important to understand If you want to understand a society, a country, a state in the Middle East, we need to understand also the history, because history is present now in the agreement, in the behavior, in the political behavior now, and it affects, influence everyone. The conflict, I give you a great example, but there are many, many examples of it. The conflict in the early days of Islam between the followers of Ali bin Talib and the other leaders of Islam gave rise to a constant conflict between the Sunni school of thought and the Shia school of thought. This is not an ordinary religious controversy. The rift between the two is so deep that they accuse the other side of heresy, no less. In some ways, this conflict is deeper than the conflict of parts of the Arab world with Israel. Sunni Arab countries are very worried about Shiite Iran. When we look at the Middle East today, the question that is supposed to haunt Europe is, how did all the Fertile Crescent countries become Shiite-dominated countries? Think about Lebanon, which began as a country with Christian dominance, that is now under Shiite influence with Hezbollah. Syria was a country with a Sunni dominance, and today is an Alawite dictatorship under Shiite influence. Iraq has been under Sunni rule for countries and is now a Shiite-controlled country. So the entire Fertile Crescent is currently open to Iran. Look, this is Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, see? And to the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. There has been this is an historic change in the balance of power between the Sunni and the Shia, unparalleled since the founding of Islam in the 7th century. For the first time, the modern Arab countries see this change and are very apprehensive. They're afraid. Iran has ambitions to lead the entire Muslim world, and not only to lead, but to control. To that end, to that goal, Iran is most interested in an unstable Middle East. Iran uses terrorist organizations that serve as its proxy, long arm, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiites in Iraq, Hamas in Gaza, and more and more and more. With regard to Israel, it's very interesting, the relation between Iran and Israel. Think about it. We do not share any border with them. There is no territorial conflict between us. We actually have also a very good history since the time of the Bible. Jerusalem is not a central in the Shiite tradition either. And yet, in a very strange way, according to the degree of obsession, madness, and tremendous effort that the Ayatollahs regime invests in hatred against Israel, here also against America, and its desire to harm us and even destroy us, God forbid, it seems that it's this regime raison d'etre. So we recently heard on May 22nd last year, Supreme Leader Khamenei describing Israel, this is only an example, a cancerous growth in the Middle East, tumor. He said, I quote, the Zionist virus, this is a Nazi term, the Zionist virus that has survived so far will not survive long. The Zionist entity will not survive. It will be eliminated. End of quote. You see, the greatest anti-Semites in the world, even the greatest anti-Semites in the world, have learned to disguise, to hide their words. It's not nice, it's not politically correct to be anti-Semite now. So they're replacing Jews with Zionists. According to the definition of anti-Semitism of IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which were adopted also last January by the Italian government as well. So both types are the same anti-Semitism, the old one and the new one. They can replace Jews by Zionists, but it's the same hatred. And so the modern Arab countries see all of this. And a coalition is being formed between Israel and the moderate Arab states, a regional defense alliance that is changing the Middle East. We are only at the beginning of process. Erdogan, by the way, Erdogan's Turkey too, with its ambitions, also ambitions to lead the Muslim world, maybe to reestablish a caliphate, worries Arab countries. And that is another reason for them to come closer to us, to Israel. In recent months, Israel has signed a normalization agreement with the United Arab Emirates and with Bahrain. Later, we were informed about Sudan joining the wave of peace. Sudan is very interesting because in Sudan in 1967, the Arab political doctrine called the three no's. In August 1967, no to peace with Israel, no to recognition of Israel, and no to negotiations with Israel. So Sudan now is joining. Change. Shift of paradigm. Morocco has also recently joined and has signed an agreement of open diplomatic relations with Israel. We have in Israel more than 600,000 of Jews that originally came from Morocco. Unlike peace with Egypt and Jordan, peace with the Gulf states has a different, warmer character. The Emirates have a positive attitude towards the Israelis. Lessons of Hebrew are flourishing, and you just, it will be a good lesson for all of you to watch the social network media and see the change in making and the let's say even the love and effect between the Israelis and the Emirates and other. We talked earlier about the collapse of the Arab nation. By the way, Arab nation state, a country like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have not collapsed, perhaps because they are not nation states in the sense that they do not unite in them a few dominant minorities, but are one central tribe. So there are no ethnic conflict. Changing the old paradigm includes not only the collapse of the Arab nation states, but also the premise of the Obama administration, of which Europe was also a partner, which is that a normalization agreement of Arab states with Israel would not be possible without progress in resolving the conflict with the Palestinians. This was the paradigm or the premise. Okay. Now, in the words of former Secretary of State, listen. This is about 6 years ago. The Secretary of State, John Kerry, speaks at Saban Forum. Listen what he said only 6 years ago.
There will be no separate peace between Israel and the Arab world. I want to make that very clear to all of you. I've heard several prominent politicians in Israel sometimes saying, well, the Arab world's in a different place now. We just have to reach out to them and we can work some things with the Arab world and we'll deal with the Palestinians. No, 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 and no. I can tell you that reaffirmed even in the last week as I have talked to leaders of the Arab community. There will be no advance and separate peace with the Arab world without the Palestinian process and Palestinian peace. Everybody needs to understand that. To be key. Yeah, but it depends, Jeff. I think it really is a question. Let's take
So,
the big picture here.
Everybody has to understand it. Yes? Interesting. So what John Kerry did not understand, and it's not just John Kerry and Thomas Friedman, but an entire current of politicians, journalists, and thinkers. By the way, you heard what he said? You heard John Kerry? It was heard. Professor Piga.
It was heard.
Okay, thank you. So John Kerry, just to summarize, John Kerry said that only 6-7 years ago that there will be no peace with Israel without progressing with the Palestinians and the peace process with the Palestinian conflict. We see now in front of our eyes that he didn't understand the region, and this is what wasn't only his it wasn't his only mistake then. But it's not John Kerry and Thomas Friedman, but entire current of politicians, journalists, and thinkers, even here in Europe and in Italy, who have spent most of their time and energy marketing a political doctrine that does not correspond with reality. It is difficult to admit a mistake, and even more difficult to change a paradigm in the light of which we have conducted ourselves for many years. So maybe this is the reason for the sore reaction to these peace agreements of Israel with the Arab countries. At best, they praise the agreement, but immediately mentioned just as a religious obligation or mantra, the commitment to a two-state solution. Okay, it's very good, but what about the Palestinians? It is worth dwelling on this issue because, in my opinion, it centers the blindness of significant parts of the West in relation to Israel and the Middle East. Well, the slogan, two-state solution, that everyone quotes, has a sequel, continuing. What is? Two-state solution, two states for two people. Interesting. The Oslo Accords of 1993 between the Palestinians and Israel were based on the assumption that at the root of the conflict between us and the Palestinians were two national movements, Jewish one, the Zionist movement, and Arab Palestinian, even it's new, but there are. So the year that have passed since then have taught us that while we, the Israelis, recognized Palestinian nationality, they never recognized our nationality. For them, the Jews remain only a religion and not a nationality, not a nation, and therefore are not really entitled to their own national definition and state. In addition to the fact that there is no historical connection between the Jews and their country, according to them. You know, we are what I said is not a hypothesis, but an overstatement. Listen, here is Article 20 of the Palestinian National Covenant, if you will, their constitution. I quote, "The Balfour Declaration, the mandate for Palestine, and everything that has been based upon them are deemed null and void." Second, claims of historical or religious ties of Jews with Palestine are incompatible with the fact of history and the true conception of what constitutes statehood. Listen, they said there are no roots, Jewish roots in Israel. There is no connection between the Jewish people and the Holy Land, which means also there is no connection between the Christian and the Holy Land, because if there are no Jews, there are no Christians. But it also teaches us how their attitudes toward facts or history or science. But so first, Balfour Declaration is cancelled. Second, there are no roots of the Jews in the Holy Land. And third, most important, listen to this, Article 20 of the Palestinian National Charter. I quote, Judaism, being a religion, is not an independent nationality, nor do Jews constitute a single nation with an identity of its own. They are citizens of the states to which they belong. So the Palestinian that, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, no one heard about them, said that the Jews, one of the ancient nations on earth, are not a nation. But, you know, although we do not need recognition from the Palestinians, this is very important to understand. This is an indication of the sincerity of their intentions. It also explains why they never agreed to any settlement with the Jews. Compromise, they never agreed. Even in 1937, when the Peel Commission proposed to divide the land, listen, this is what we received it from the nation, all of this. But they cut Transjordan in 1922, gave it to the Arabs, and this is now the Jordan now. So what left was western part of the land of Israel. And even this, in 1937, the Peel Committee proposed this map. It means divide the land that allotted us only about 17. Listen, this orange is only what was proposed to the Jews. 70%. All the violet or the pink is an Arab country. And this is Jerusalem, like a corridor of international rule. So Ben-Gurion, the leader of the Jews, said, yes, think about it. If we had only these, in 1937, we could save millions of Jews from the Holocaust. The Palestinians, the Arab Palestinians, because in that time also the Jews were Palestinians, the Arab Palestinians said, of course, no. And 75% they received here. They also, of course, refused the UN partition plan on November 29th, 1947. So what is in brown is the Palestinian state, is the Arab state, see? And in blue is a Jewish state, most of the desert. We received most of the desert. And they received the heart of the country. And even though they said no, and the day after, they started a war against us. The chairman of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, openly stated many times that he would never recognize Israel as a Jewish state. The reason is very simple. An agreement means the end of conflicts and end of demands. That is recognition of Jews as a nation and the right to at least part of the country. They understand it. And they do not want to sign, because signing agreement means I recognize the Jews as a people, as a nation that deserve at least part of this land. To European ears, this sounds like a semantic conceptual debate, not a discussion of reality. But this is not the true for the Palestinians and in the Middle East. Less than 10 years ago, about 17,000 documents in English documenting the years of negotiation with Israel and the Americans up to that time were leaked from the office of Saib Arikat, who was in charge of the negotiation on behalf of the Palestinian Authority at the time. You heard about WikiLeaks. So these were 17,000 documents that are the internal Palestinian discourse among themselves and have something to teach about their intentions. This is how they speak between themselves. So members of the negotiation team recommended one of the emails, Arikat, not to use the phrase two states for two people. They told him, no, it's not good. Why? Because it implies that the Palestinian recognizes the Jews' right to self-determination. Because if you say two states for two peoples, it means that also the Jews are people. It means that they deserve a self-determination. They deserve part of the country. So he asked them what to say. They told him, say two states living side by side in peace. Something very vague. The Palestinian Authority, even today, when it speaks of two states, it's without saying for two peoples. Now listen what also the politicians say. The European politicians do not understand it. All the time they say the two-state solution, the two-state solution. No, for two people. If they do not recognize us as a people, whom do we sign with? Whom do we negotiate with? You don't want to buy a car from a person that do not recognize you as a human being, because one day after you will buy the car, he will come and take the car from you because you are not a human being. So the logic on which the tactic is based was explained to Arikat. This is Arikat. This is Arikat. And this is Tzipi Livni, the foreign minister of that time. So the logic on which the tactic is based was explained to Arikat in another letter leaked on May 3rd, 2009, which stated that mentioning the right of both people to self-determination may have a negative impact on refugee rights, i.e., the right of return, as it implies that Palestinian refugees can exercise their right of return only in the context of the right to self-determination. So it may be interpreted as, quote, the PLO is no longer seeking Palestinian self-determination in the territory of the state of Israel. This is also a very interesting thing. They declare that they want a state, but they want that their citizen will enter Israel, the Israeli part. So it's very interesting. So thus, consistently in the Palestinian discourse, two-state solution means Palestinian state free of Jews, Judenrein, alongside a state that in meantime is allowed to be called Israel, but to which the millions of refugees who are to flood it and change its identity are supposed to return. Therefore, my main argument is that, and I challenge all of you, the Palestinians never ever wanted an independent state alongside the state of Israel. It's true that they wanted that we, the Israeli, would not have a state for our own, but they never agreed to a territorial compromise, even the most generous, as I showed you. Why? Because such a compromise would oblige the Palestinians to recognize the right of the Jews to the land, at least for the part that would remain with them, and this would pull the carpet under the feet of the claim of return of the Arab refugees. So this is also the reason why we have never heard from an official Palestinian spokesman what their final demands are. That after those are met, the end of the conflict will be announced. I ask also here in the Senate and in the camera, does anyone in the world know what the Palestinians want? Really? It means we want 1, 2, 3, 4. After the fulfillment of what we want, we will be willing to declare end of conflict, end of demands. No one in the world knows. There is no official document of it. While everyone knows what Israel offers. This is also what I said, not understanding the Middle East or judging the Middle East with a European westernized perspective. So not such, as I said, we do not have such a document about the end of conflicts because the end of the conflict does not depend on any territorial compromises, but on beliefs and ideologies. The fact that the moderate Arab state changed direction in relation to Israel is that they understand today that they actually gave the Palestinians the right to veto their future. That is why more and more logical voices are being heard in the Arab state asking why not profit from the fruits of the connection with Israel? This question becomes more acute in light of the constant Palestinian refusal of the last 100 years. As I mentioned, they always said no to any plan, even those who were very generous to them and never paid a price for refusing. The Palestinians supported Hitler in the 40s, Saddam Hussein in the 80s, the Muslim Brotherhood in the 2000s, and the present day Iran, at least Hamas. In contrast to the main line led by the other Arab states, without being required to change direction and with automatic support of Arab states and even automatic support of many of the West. This has led to the fact that from year to year, they have hardened their position in the opposite correlation to the degree of their achievement. The Palestinian veto on peace with Israel blocked the Middle East and prevented the other Arab state from forging normal ties with the state of Israel. When Arab states seek to be our friend, they do not do us a favor. It is a matter of mutual interest. Israel has a lot to contribute to them in many areas: economy, technology, science, health, agriculture, and more. And of course, security, especially in light of Iran's plans to hegemony in the Middle East. And a few words about the refugee problem. I don't know if you know, but it is very important to understand how the EU and other well-intended entities perpetuate the problem rather than resolve it. So as I said, I don't know if all of you know, but there are two different refugee organizations in the UN and different also definition of who is refugee. One organization is for the whole refugee of the world, and one is only for the Palestinians. The most significant difference between the two organizations is the definition of who is refugee. It turns that the United Nations has two definitions for it. The United Nations High Commission for Refugee, UNHCR, established the Refugee Convention, which states that refugees are those who were forced to flee their country as a result of political persecution or violation of their civil or political rights. And later, the concept of refugee was extended to those who fled following a war that did not involve educating children. In contrast, the UNRWA definition of the Palestinian refugee is persons whose normal place of residence was Palestine during the period of June 1st, 1946 to May 15, 1948, which is the date of the establishment of the State of Israel, and who lost both home and means of livelihood as a result of the 1948 conflict. So I ask all of you, why two definitions? And second, why is a stay of only 2 years in that land, 1946, enough to be considered a refugee displaced from his or her homeland? Do not the Palestinians claim that they have lived in the area since time immemorial? If a resident of, for example, Iraq or Sudan came to Palestine in 1943 seeking work, a job, and as a result of the war between the Jews and the Arabs, he fled, why does he entitle to the status of a Palestinian refugee? He and his descendants forever as the expense of the European taxpayer. In this way, we will reach tens of millions in the coming year entitled to refugee status. By the way, in the whole world, the refugee status does not pass to the next generation. Only you, if you were forced to flee, you're entitled to be called refugee. But you cannot inherit this right to your children or to your descendants. So, and whoever received citizenship in country when he or her were absorbed loses his refugee status. If you were a refugee and you came to Italy and you have an Italian citizenship, of course you're not deserved to get help, to receive help from the UN. But not so with the Palestinian refugee. They can inherit the refugee status, even to those who have already been absorbed into other countries. It means that if you have a Palestinian Italian now in Italy, he also has a right to be called a refugee, even though he is Italian citizen. Isn't this absurd? In Europe, on the other hand, tens of millions of refugees settled in the various world wars and certainly did not pass on their status from generation to generation. This perpetuates the problem, not resolve it. Simultaneously with the formation of the Palestinian refugees, we have to understand a problem arose for Jewish refugees who had fled and were mainly expelled from our country as a result of the establishment of Israel. Some of them, you can see here in Rome, Libyan Jews, for example, that they became good Italian citizens. But most of the Jewish refugees came to Israel. We are speaking about 850,000 Jews, refugees, more than the number of the Palestinian refugees at that time. They left in the Arab countries immense property that was nationalized and confiscated by the regimes there. Did you hear about it? Did they claim something? My parents left Iran and came to Israel in December 1950. They lived for 10 years in refugee camp, in tents and barracks. This is a very good book that I recommend all of you, The War of Return by Adi Schwartz and Nat Wilf. Read it because it will open your eyes, because it gives all the fact that you need. So these are examples of Yemeni Jews that fled refugee to Israel, walking from Yemen to Israel. Think how long they walked. This is the place where my parents lived, refugee camps in the 50s, and then in barracks until they moved to a small house of their own where I was born, in the city of Petah Tikva. Despite the great injustice caused to the Jews of the Arab countries, Israel did not stop history to complain and cry, but acted to settle these refugees. The UN has not set up a special refugee organization for them. I am happy to stand here in front of you as a son of such refugees. But my parents, blessed be their memory, never complained about difficulties in the new homeland because they understood the meaning of living in an independent Jewish state after 2,000 years of exile. The perpetuation of Palestinian refugee problem is intended to eliminate this dream and not to resolve their problem. And an important note on the name Palestine. What is Palestine? In the year 132 CE, 2nd century, 62 years after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Romans, another revolt broke out against the Roman Empire. The revolt under the command of Shimon Bar Kokhba lasted 3 years. And during the revolt, 2 Roman legions were probably wiped out. The Jews, for 2 or 3 years, declared independence, but the empire invested many legions in order to oppress this revolt. And Judea was almost completely destroyed. In a period of about, this was the last revolt, 12th revolt in a period of 300 years. Major uprising that broke out in the land of Israel. Following the last revolt in the year 135, the Emperor Adrian decided to make the name Judea to be omitted from all Roman documents. They replaced the Hebrew name with the name Syria Palestina, which the Romans found in the writing of Herodotus. Palestina, after the sea people, Palestina is a name after the sea people who invaded Canaan in the 12th century before Christ and disappeared about 700 years later. These are the Philistines who appear in the Bible, whose main war was to deny the sovereignty to the Israelite tribes over their land. The Roman also changed the name Jerusalem into Aelia Capitolina. This is all the empire. Aelia Capitolina. In the case of Jerusalem, these are, you see, Aelia Capitolina coins instead of Jerusalem. In the case of Jerusalem, they did not succeed to eliminate the name Jerusalem. But in the case of Judea or Israel, the new name lasted until the establishment of the state of Israel. When we say Palestina or Palestine, we're speaking about an Adrianic name that was given to Judea or to Israel. And who lived in this country was Palestinian, because this was the term that the European used to understand it. So even Jews that were born in Israel, in the land of Israel, 80 years ago, were also Palestinians. So we're not speaking about an entity that was owned by the Arabs or something else. This is a Roman name. So political science, like life science and exact science, relies naturally on rational thought. Niccolo Machiavelli taught the West to address the interest and human calculations of people and its leaders. I ask you not only to remain in the realm of interest and rationalism, not to be only students of Machiavelli, but to think of the Middle East and the whole world also in terms taken from the field of myth and psychohistory. The symbols in the Middle East are not empty signifiers, but contain significant worldviews that seal the fates of peoples and nations. The philosopher Ernest Cassirer showed in his essay on man that man is a symbolic creature, homo symbolicus. The symbols mediate reality for us, including Western men, all the more so in the Middle East. This is the key to understand the Middle East. Invest your learning in symbols of the place and the history of the place. The Jewish people are at the seam between the two worlds, contains both the West and the East. The state of Israel is visible historical miracle. Without a real land, scattered among thousands of communities for thousands of years in the world, the Jewish people survived. This is a miracle, that alone. There is also no nation in the world that has undergone systematic genocide in modern times, like the Holocaust, and managed to survive. This alone is a miracle. And there is no other nation in the world that after thousands of years in exile has managed to return to its ancient homeland, renew its language, and establish an independent state for the third time in its history. This achievement is much greater if we understand that it happened only 3 years after the Holocaust. And despite the invasion of armies from 7 Arab countries, look, all of them invaded Israel in 1947, 1948, to the newly born state that sought to finish the work of the Nazis. We defeated them, thanks God, with meager forces and a heavy price as we stood with our backs to the wall or to the sea. This too is a miracle. But all these facts together are more than a miracle. We came back in history as a people to live an independent life and not rely on others as we did during history. We learned our lesson in history. This is the meaning of Zionism. Zionism comes from the Bible, to return to Zion. So Zionism is the political expression of the biblical promise to return home to Zion after terrible exile. And I said, these rights were acknowledged by, as we said, these rights were acknowledged by the world in San Remo and later by the League of Nations. But Zionism is also good news for the world. Now that we, the Jews, do not have to think only about survival, we are free to develop our science and culture and also our spirit for the benefit of all humanity and mankind. Israel does not keep its innovations and inventions to itself. We share our knowledge with the whole free world. We also have an important role in the changing the paradigm in the Middle East for the benefit of all the peoples of the region. Some words of conclusion. After the first destruction of our people in 586 before Christ, 6th century before Christ, the first generation of exile Jews in Babylon were desperate. The Jews then thought that they would be the last generation, that the fate of all the peoples of their time who were exiled from their countries will be also their fate. So they turned to the spiritual and intellectual leader of their generation, the prophet Ezekiel, and say to him, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. In short, they told him, we are lost. In response, the prophet turned with a mighty prophetic vision, which contains within it the whole story of the history of our people. In his vision, he stood in a valley full of dry bones. Will these bones live? God tells him to prophesy about the bones, and so it happens. I quote, the bones came together, bone to bone, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And again, the prophet is asked to prophesy. Prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breath into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast multitude army. And immediately came the explanation for this strange vision. We're speaking about Ezekiel chapter 37. This is the explanation. Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken and I have done it, declares the Lord. End of quote. What does the prophet say to the generation? He is a good intellectual. He understands that he needs to encourage his people, not only to tell them, oh, you're not good. The prophet Ezekiel tells his generation, do not give up. There is still hope. Now you are scattered, but one day the national body will be resurrected. You are now in exile, but one day you will return home to your land. Some 2,500 years later, at 1884, the poet Naftali Herz Imber sat in Eastern Europe, Romania, and corresponded with the prophecy of Ezekiel. He encouraged his Jewish brothers and sisters not to despair, writing in his poem, because as long as in the heart, within the soul of a Jew still yearns, and onward towards the ends of the east, and eye still gazes towards Zion, our hope is not yet lost. The 2,000 years old hope to be a free nation in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. Since then, as you see, these are the words of our national anthem, Hatikva. For this is the truth. We have never lost hope of returning to the land of our ancestors. If we were to ask one of the prisoners of Judea, if we were to ask one of the prisoners of Judea who marched in the procession of humiliation in Rome after the destruction of Jerusalem, not long ago, not long from here, not a long distance from here, near the Ark of Titus, If we ask one of the Jews in this humiliation, march of humiliation, Jew, what is your dream? Would answer immediately, without doubt, quoting from Psalms, when the Lord restored the captives of Zion, we were like dreamers. He would answer, my dream is to return to the land of Israel, to rebuild Jerusalem from its ruins and reestablish our kingdom again. This hope was embodied in the promise of the prophet of Israel that even if we go into exile, and if it is long, and even if we have dangers and peril like the Holocaust, we will eventually return home. If not today, then tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, then in 1,000 years or 2,000. But at the end, we will return. And we in Israel live the old dream. The dream came true. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, thank you so much. I think we are ready to receive a lot of questions from our students from all over the world. We don't have that much time. We have 17 minutes. So I ask all our students, we will go, if you agree, Ambassador, 3 by 3 questions. I see already 3 questions from our students, indeed, from the Middle East. So that's fantastically great. And please introduce yourself. Be brief, be to the point, so that we can have as many questions as we want. Nor, please start.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Noor Samara. I'm a GG1 student, and I'm Palestinian Jordanian. I have 2 questions. The first one is kind of a rhetorical one. It is, why do Jews have the right of return after being displaced thousands of years ago, but Palestinians who have been displaced 70 years ago don't? The second question is, it's a question that I've always thought about, given the fact that Israel is a Jewish state. Why is it not living up to its peaceful Jewish values? And by that, I'm talking about the constant human rights violations and the constant international law violations and so on. Thank you.
Please hold on, Ambassador, for your response. Thank you, Noor. Yazan.
Good morning. My name is Yazan Gusous, and I'm a GG1 as well. I'm from Jordan. And I have 2 small questions. I'm going to go through them quickly. Considering that you called for borderlessness and for a united world, what do you think of what has been called a passive genocide, the vaccination apartheid currently happening in Israel, where only Israeli citizens are being vaccinated while the Palestinians are left out to die? My second question is, considering you said, and I quote, Israel is exceptional, and you mentioned that 600,000 Syrians have already been killed in the war in Syria. What do you think of the Israeli bombing of Syrian civilian neighborhoods right now? Thank you.
Please hold, Ambassador. Thank you, Yazan. Rani.
Hello, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your presentation. I am Rani Al-Sarakibi, first-year global governance student from Damascus, Syria. I, however, have a different perspective on the whole Israeli conflict. And I really enjoyed your presentation. We agree on many things. We have some minor disagreements, but I'm a person who certainly believes that peace is what will bring us stronger together. And I'm a very strong advocate for peace between Syria and Israel. But we've seen decades of peace between Jordan, Egypt, and Israel. However, that peace seemed more like an ending rather than a beginning, because we know that it came from governments and not the people. And I am working towards building up more towards the public opinion and studying the situation in the region. But how do you think Israel could use its soft power to spread these ideas, to spread the notion of Israel? And also, can we see a change in the Israeli foreign policy away from Arab governments and more towards the Arab public? And thank you very much.
Ambassador, your turn. Thank you.
Okay, Samara, Thank you for your sincere question. The right of return, as we said, as I told you, why do you think that the right of return or the definition of a Palestinian refugee is only a person that came 2 years before the establishment of the State of Israel? We are not speaking about thousands of years. We're speaking about someone that came maybe to seek a job, and not only him, but what about the responsible of the people of the region? Why do not Lebanon absorb the Palestinians there? Why do not Syria absorb them? Why do not other places absorb them? Like we absorbed more refugees from Arab states in our country, why didn't they absorb them? But when you say that a right of return, we do not care about a right of return to a Palestinian state, but not to our state. This is absurd, because if you want to divide the land, so you have your state, bring into it wherever you want. If we're speaking about rights, well, look at Google Maps. We did not hear about Palestinian people 60, 70 years ago. Before the State of Israel, the mandate, everyone were Palestinians, because of Palestina, they were Arabs. The partition plan in the UN spoke about Jewish state and Arab state, not a Palestinian state. So I'm asking you, do you know what the Palestinians want? Can you tell me what are the final demands of the Palestinians? We want 1, 2, 3, 4, that after that, they will be willing to declare end of conflict, end of demands, and to acknowledge the rights of the Jews on their land, historically, religiously. Didn't you see the Article 20 of the Palestinian Charter, National Charter? The Jews are not a people. This is the way that people understand history and science. To deny the right, to deny the Jews. I mean, this is an entity. So, about human rights, you speak about human rights, and in that I want to also to mention Yazan, apartheid. You say apartheid. Well, my lecture was to ask you not to lean on disinformation and fake news, but to seek all the sources of information. Now, I am ambassador of Israel. I'm not vaccinated yet. So do you think that I am in charge, I am responsible to vaccinate others before I vaccinate my mother? Second, we bought 5 million vaccines, also more than to bring to the Palestinians. But I don't understand. San Marino is also a state here in Italy. They did not vaccinate even one there. So what are the Palestinians different than all the world? How many Italians were vaccinated? 1.2 million out of 60 millions. So only the Israeli needs to take care of the poor Palestinians? Don't they have?
Ambassador, just to tell you that since the discussion is going on, before answering to Rani, Yazan is saying to your words, if you're talking about the Jewish Arabs going to Israel, when then they are Jews, shouldn't they be called Israeli citizens now? Just not to be racist, that's all, he says.
I don't understand. The Israeli Arabs now has the same equal rights as any other Jew in the state. The Palestinians have their own autonomy. They have the rights, they have the flag, they have the budget, they have their security, they have everything. Israel is not involving in their life. Israel is protecting in the envelope, protecting us from some terrorists there, and we're protecting also the Palestinians from the fate of Hamas that will take control as it did in Gaza. Do you want the moment Israel will not be in the secure of that place, Hamas will take control? This is what you wish for the Palestinians, to be in an Islamic state, denying their civil rights, their freedom of expression, everything? And do you think that I spoke about history, we learn from history, do you think that we are foolish that we can let another Islamic entity to be in the heart of the land without any defending us? From my porch in Rehovot, near Weissman Institute, I can see in bare eyes the hills of Ramallah. We need only one crazy 16 years old with a missile to block the Ben Gurion airport. So what we are doing is, right now, we give the Palestinians are the tranquil community in the Middle East because they do not share the fate of Gaza. The Islamic movement there are oppressed, and if we want a good life for them, so maybe first of all let's think about what's going to happen, because we know, according to the polls, that in any election that are going to be now, if they will give a free election, Hamas will take control. So think about it if you want another dictatorship in the area for them. And of course, there is no apartheid. First of all, I recommend to all of you that use the word apartheid to learn very carefully the political history of South Africa. No apartheid. In Israel, there are Arabs that are Supreme Court. There is an Arab judge that sent an Israeli president to the jail. And the Israeli Arabs, now we're speaking about tens of thousands, are going to vote to other parties from the right, because they understood that if the Emirates can make peace with us, so why can't they do it? Why can't they be part of the integration in the Israeli society? About the Palestinians, as long as we can keep our security, we do not involve their life. And actually, there is more and more collaboration also in terms of works, of jobs, of science, of health, of many other benefits that the Palestinians have, and the Jordanians do not have. The Palestinians have more benefit from Israel than the Jordanian people. So about bombing in Syria. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, only bombing. I know that the butcher there is not Israel, is Assad and his troops, that he killed all of this. Israel wants to defend ourselves from if Hezbollah wants to be, I don't know if you know, but we built a hospital near the border of Syria, and we took care of thousands of Syrians on account of Israel, with all the best medicine that we can give them, a treatment. So we're speaking about apartheid, we're speaking about bombing, we're speaking about defending ourselves. We know in what neighborhood we are living. Look, are we responsible for all the massacre in Syria? Were we responsible also for 11 million refugees there? What we are talking about? If they wanted, I mean, we can help everyone if they want. So in that case, I just want to say that there is no apartheid, and also Israel is not involved in Syria. only when we have to protect ourselves, but we do not. We do not. I mean, I wish them a good life, but this is not the case in that. And about the last thing about the soft power, to speak with the Arab public and not with the government. Now in the time of the social network, we know that there is a direct conversation and information, and I think that all of them see Israel as a democratic state with good science and technology, and they want all the same, and I wish all of them the same fate for them. I just want to add you one point to you, Samara and other. I don't know if you know, but just go and check it. Many of the Palestinians now that we have like a conflict with them are originally Jews that were converted to Islam since the 7th century and until the 11th century because of the Islamic occupation of the land of Israel. Many of them look at their roots. Many Palestinians even now keep a Jewish tradition in that way or other. I'm speaking about research, many research, interesting research. I saw it. I saw them in my eyes in many cases. So if we think about it, I think if we think that we are one family, all the people in Israel, in the land of Israel, one family, that in the 1st century we split it into a Christian family, a Jewish family. And in the 7th and so on centuries, we split it to a 3rd family, Muslim, but all of us have the same root, the same Israelite roots. So maybe we can hope that for the next generation, maybe we understand it, that we are one family and we do not have to fight, and we can cooperate in one state together with equal right to everyone and prosperity. But until then, the lesson that we just learned 8 years ago is not to account of other in terms of security. So we need to. I just want to give you a recommendation. Memory. Look at the website Memory, MEMRI. It is the best website that translates for you to English all the Arab states and Muslim states from TV and other. It will be very interesting because you see changes that are being occurred now. And also, if you hear and use, please check it twice, 3 times. And as I said, try to seek underneath reality and not only by the declarations.
Ambassador, I would like to have the last 3 questions. You will notice later on when you will receive it that in the chat room there has been a lot of debates going on. I'm sorry that we don't have the time to focus on each one intervention. If you are kind enough to give a shorter answer so we can accommodate all the questions that we still have. I have Virginia. Please, Virginia.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for giving your precious time. I just wanted to ask a question that's been giving in my mind. I'm a GG1 and I'm from Italy. So since you expressed that in your personal opinion, the crisis in the Middle East is due to the external intervention of Europe, my question is, do you think that Israel would have been able to expand during the past year to the territory of the Gaza Strip and the Cisjordanian without the help of the United States that, I remember, just a few days ago has destined $3.3 billion for security reasons to Israel and $500 million for missilistic cooperation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Virginia. Please, Ambassador, hold on. I had Arda also, but I don't see Arda anymore. I have Yazan, but please, Yazan, hold on. Rosa Bruno.
So, good morning. I am Rosa Bruno.
I don't see you, Rosa.
GG1 student, and I come from Italy.
Rosa, I
Mine
don't
is
see
not
you.
a question.
She doesn't.
Sorry, my camera is not.
Rosa, sorry.
My camera is not working.
Yes.
Sorry.
Rosa, let me explain.
Can
The
you hear me?
camera, ambassador,
Yes, I
the
hear you.
camera is not
Please,
working.
please continue.
So mine is not a question, and I'm very sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you to please lower your voice? I understand that these topics are dear to you, but I guess that some of us have different perspectives, and there's no need to raise your voice. Thank you. Sorry again.
I didn't understand. I raised my voice.
Yeah, before, while you were talking.
I don't have. No, I think that this is not a polite comment because I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke, and if I spoke enthusiastically, so my voice became louder. But this is not raise your voice. Raise my voice is to shout on someone else. I didn't shout, and I think that this is not a appropriate comment.
Sorry, I didn't want to be unpolite. Sorry if I came across as unpolite. I guess that sometimes.
Do you have a question?
No.
There is, Ambassador, there is no question by Rosa, but Benjamin is commenting now about this thing. It's about passion, but I would like to go forward with question. Thank you, Rosa. Arda, please.
Sorry.
Hello, Ambassador. I'm Arda Sepici from Turkey, and I would like to ask a question to you. I totally agree with your comment saying that like Middle East is a different geography and European views can't be applied here. But I would also want to ask a question about this to you. Like we can see that still European powers getting involved in Middle Eastern issues and Middle Eastern problems. Because you know Middle East is very rich in oil, so it should be like the regions has a very strategic value. But we can also see that in usually in issues between Israel and Arabic states, European powers support Israel. So considering this fact, do you like
what fact? What fact? I didn't hear you. What fact?
Among the conflict between Arabic states and Israel, European powers usually support Israel. Considering this, do you really want European powers to not get involved, or do you still support your view of Middle East being a different geography and Europeans shouldn't get involved? Thank you.
Good. Do you want to answer, Professor Piga?
We have Arman.
Arman, where are you, Arman?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Arman, and I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's might be more of a European perspective to some extent. I wanted to first of all thank you for a different perspective from what we usually hear, I think. And I wanted to move a little bit from politics because, I mean, the title of the conversation doesn't entitle only politics. So I wanted to hear about the recent developments when it comes to like cybersecurity and the response to the COVID crisis, and what other countries can learn from Israel. Thank you very much.
Again, your question. I didn't understand your question.
Yes, sorry. Okay, I just wanted to hear what the rest of the world can learn from Israel in terms of cybersecurity. And I know we will have further, let's say, meetings about these topics, but I just wanted to hear about your, let's say, take on the subject. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Virginia, where is Virginia? Virginia, I just recommend you to look at Israeli economy. Actually, we do not need the American support, okay? Because our GDP is much, much more than $1.5 billion that America gives us every year. Because I don't know if you know the budget of Israel. Our GDP is now more than Japan. So America has interest in the Middle East. As one of the politicians in America said, Israel is the most cheaper carriers in the Middle East. So America has interest. We give America also many support and knowledge. So this support is not one-sided. And you said that if we can expand to the other places without the support of America. Well, what you said, what you call Cisjordania is our homeland. This is where we came from. This is our root, the place of our roots. When we spoke in exile about Israel, we spoke about these places. So it's not expanding. We are not colonialists. This is our homeland. If there is a connection between a people and a country, in this connection, 3,000 years. So we don't need anyone to expand because the world sometimes help us, sometimes did not help us. But we also help others. And actually, I understand from you are from Italy, yes? So there are good connections between Israel and Italy. And it's two-sided, because we help also Italy in many cases. I personally arrange a medical delegation of doctors and nurses to Piemonte 2 months ago to help them fighting the COVID, even though in Israel also we have problems. We share information, intelligence with Italy. We do together many things. In many fields, in science, we have agreements of science against COVID, etc., etc. In agriculture. So we don't need also America to prosper to this. America has also interest in being friend of Israel. The same that Italy has interest to be friend of Israel. The time in history when the Jews begged for living or for has been passed. Because we live now in different place. We live in our free country and we want to defend ourselves. And if the meaning of compromising is endanger ourselves, we learned the lesson. It's very easy to sit outside in Europe and to speak about, oh, you are given support from America. No. We can survive without this $1.5 billion dollar. So it's not a lot in Israeli terms. But this is a collaboration between countries. Okay? Arda. Yes, I wish that the European will not involve in the area. It means in terms of Israeli policy. Yes, yes. Because as I said, most of them do not understand the area and they did a lot of mistakes. Yes, but it doesn't mean, I mean, it's like a family. We have argues. We have lots of argues, and some things we share and some not. We share the same values, but we have different perspective on what's going on. So if we can if we can agree, we agree. If we do not agree, we do not agree. But it doesn't mean that the European Union is correct. Actually, as I showed you in my lectures, only a few examples, but they were wrong in their perspectives. So maybe the moderate Arab countries understand something that the European do not understand. Maybe because they understand their region more than that. So and I don't agree that Europe traditionally support Israel. No, the EU traditionally, in many cases, do not support Israel. I know as ambassador many times at the UN, many absurd resolutions that the EU, many of them do not help us. The absurdity. For example, they voted, or they did not interfere, Syria, that condemned, Syria offered to the World Health Organization an offer to condemn Israel for not taking care the Syrian citizen in the Golan Heights. So everyone knows that this is a lie, because the Syrian, what they call the Druze, are now Israeli citizens, so they are merit to the best medical treatment in Israel, because they are citizens of Israel. But we also took care, as I said, of thousands of Syrians that fled from the civil war there to receive treatment, good treatment, a medical treatment in Israel. So Europe did not say, this is absurd and we are going to vote against it. No, they refrain maximum. So it's not true that they support us. And let's do not forget that for thousands of years, Europe not only did not support the Jewish people, but abused. So the fact that now history has been changed a little is a good shift, as I said, of paradigm, but don't confuse with others. Arman, cybersecurity and vaccines and other. Today, cybersecurity is very important because we are living in a flat world that does not need borders in order to invade other countries. So you can do it in cyber. Israel and our Prime Minister Netanyahu, they identified this field in the, 15 years ago. And today, in the whole world, 40% of the investment in cybersecurity are in America, and 40% are invested in Israel, and the rest of the world, 20%. Because we became expert in that area, and we can help, and we help many countries in the world, including, of course, Italy, and actually also this university, Tor Vergata, and other. What we can learn from Israel, look at what's going on in the vaccines operation. Israel is being vaccinated very quickly. And I don't understand why Europe cannot do it the same. By the way, Samara, until we finish our vaccinated, we will be able to vaccinate also the Palestinians, and before Europe will finish it. So don't worry. As I said, even I was not vaccinated already. But in any case, maybe in that thing, we can learn from Israel how to be to do this operation in a very quick and useful manner. For example, to open all the football stadium here in Italy, to build some tents and to put people in a line to vaccinate all of them. I think that Italy can vaccinate 500,000 people every day, 500,000 every day in all Italy. I hope.
Ambassador, as you see, a lot of students, even though we are well past the 2 hours, have stayed to ask you questions.
I have time. We can continue. Don't worry.
That is very important. Thank you so much. I know some of the students have to go, but I know that Timoteo Marini had a question, and then I'm going to read a question from Giulio Croce, and then we're going to have Yazan closing on. Timoteo.
Good morning, Ambassador. Thanks for your speech and your availability to stay with us. Thanks for the overview that you gave us, the political, social, and historical overview that you gave us about Middle East. My question is about to what extent does the European interference in the Middle East, like exemplificative in this sense is the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the drafting of borders that do not take into consideration social, tribal, and political affiliations of people, affect the instability of Middle East nowadays? And personally, do you think that the possibility of a superpower like was the Ottoman Empire in past that controlled the area through administrative districts that were based on geographical and tribal considerations could take place nowadays, or it is a different situation that do not allow to do so? Thanks.
No, sorry, Timoteo, I didn't understand your point.
Now, my question, sorry, my question is, to what extent do you think that the European interference in the drafting of borders in Middle East, not taking into account social, tribal, and geographical consideration, affects the instability of Middle East nowadays?
I'm gonna go on, Ambassador. Thank you, Timoteo. I'm gonna go on to read you the question by Giulio Croce on the chat, if you hear me. Thank you for your presentation. And if there is still time, my question would be on the first part of your presentation about statehood and sense of community belonging in the Middle East. My question, says Giulio, is how is the community belonging and the Sharia's obedience coping with communities in major cities feeling national citizens?
I didn't understand.
Yeah, me neither. My question is, how is the community belonging and the Sharia obedience coping with communities in major cities feeling national citizens? Giulio, if you want to expand a bit, because I don't understand fully the English. Why, Yazan, why don't you ask your question in the meantime and Giulio writes it in the end so that I can read it too?
Thank you, Professor. I have a couple of points to talk about. So using your analogy, shouldn't London, considering it was built by the Romans, be Italian now? And shouldn't the Europeans in the Americas go back to Europe? That's just me using your analogy. I would love an explanation. Thank you. And regarding the hatred of Arabs to Israelis, like when they were burning the Israeli flag, are you aware that in Islam, it is haram to attack the person first? So if you refer to chapter 5, verse 45 of the Quran, you will see that a Muslim only attacks when attacked first in self-defense. They, by religion, cannot attack first, if we refer back to that verse. So in this case, considering most Arabs are actually Muslims and they are religious people, they do follow the Quran. So I would just like to know your point on that, your take on that.
Ambassador, I'm waiting for Giulio to respond. So why don't you go ahead in the meantime? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Timoteo. The involvement of the European involvement in the Middle East sometimes is good, sometimes it's not good. It depends. It depends. But as I said, we cannot force solutions on history. We have to be humble in front of history. So sometimes the West in general comes and think that everyone needs to be like it. Everyone has to be westernized. And if you do not understand, think about the Obama's speech in 2009 in Cairo. He came and thought that he could, in one speech, to change 1400 years of history of Islam. You cannot change it in good words, or I don't know what, good intentions. You have to understand the conditions. You have to understand the inner language, not only the words, because what the words represent. You know, Ferdinand Saussure, signifier and signified. The word sometimes does not, you think that you understand it, but in the Middle East, these words have different meaning. So sometimes we could cause more damage than good. So what I said is that first of all, we have to most of the time, if we can not interfere, it's good. But think about it. In the civil war, Europe, in Syria, Europe did not get involved, even though there were lots of genocide there. Why? So why Israel, when it builds a house in our homeland, it's a thing that Europe wants to involve, but murders of thousands of citizens do not deserve involvement. So this is what I'm saying. The Middle East has different rules. Sometimes you do not understand. We have to be careful. This is about what they say. Yazan, first of all, past. You say that okay, the Roman has rights in Britain. Yes, that's what they said. Yes. So who are the Romans? Because there is no connection between the Italian people and the Romans. There is a black hole of 800 years between the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century and the beginning of Italian consciousness at the 13th or 14th century with Dante Alighieri, altre Boccaccio e Petrarca, e altre other, but it took 1500 years for the Italian communities to unite in the midst of the 19th century. The Italian are not the Roman people here. And actually, as a historian, I was also surprised when I understood that I have lots of Italian intellectual friends. I asked them, what do you feel when you see the Foro Romano? They told me, very interesting archaeology. I told them, what? I mean, for me, if I see the Ark of Titus with the captives of Jerusalem, with the menorah and this, I am overwhelmed. You don't think you don't have roots in it? No. So, speaking about rights, in the land of Israel, there was never another national entity. After the destruction of the temple, destruction of Jerusalem, the land became part of empires. There was no a country with government in that place. Nothing. The country was waiting for us. For you are from Jordan. Let me ask you a question. Your government, I mean the family of kingdom, originally came from Hijaz. They are not from the area. So you have there 70% at least of Palestinians, 10% of the Hashemite family, and 20% Bedouins. Why do you think that, what are the rights of the majority? Why don't you speak about Jordan in terms of occupation? Why? Listen, and what this is what I'm speaking about roots, because Jews lived in their land, we didn't leave the country. Many of us were exiled, but in any year since the second destruction of the temple, there were Jews in this land. And we never ceased to say that this is our land. And you know, even in the traditions of the Muslims, they knew that one day the children of Israel will come back to their land. And they had to embrace us, to say, come to this region, because we want to flourish this region together, not to fight. Now you told me something from the verse in the Quran. I like it very much. I have two versions of Quran here with me. I read. But are you very naive in this? You say that because there is a verse that the Muslim do not attack, they will not attack first. You think so? Well, every verse can have interpretation. They can say, we did not attack. You attacked first. Even if this person did not attack, but they say, okay, you said one word. For us, this word is insulting and this is attack, etc., etc. But what are you saying? I mean, in 1929 in Hebron there was a Jewish community that lived for centuries and centuries. In that place, there is the tomb of the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And one day, at the summer of 1929, the Arab community of Hebron slaughtered the Jews there. They slaughtered even the doctors that took care of them, of their family. They slaughtered them, children, everyone. Who attacked them then? After the partition plan, the UN gave a partition plan. Let's separate. You have half of the country, we will have half of the country. Who attacked them? They attacked 7 armies that attacked Israel, etc., etc. So we don't have to be naive in that case. Speaking about Jordan, I don't understand that the public opinion in Jordan that is against Israel, instead of taking advantage of our ability in science, in many other places we can flourish. You have, most of Jordan is desert. We are expert in flourishing desert. Why don't you take advantage of us instead of speaking about who did it first and etc. It doesn't have a good effect on our life. Who needs it? We can work together instead of it. We can work together also with the Palestinians. We can work together with the Iranians. Look what's going on now in the Emirates. They understand it. So why can't the Jordanian not understand it? It's a pity, but it's a loss. It's a lose-lose situation. It's not good. But I think that the Jordanian have more to lose than the Israeli in not warming the relationship between us. I hope, I pray, and I think that we can be good neighbors, and we can be also, I mean, we have shared values and religion. Many aspects of religions are the same, so why not? Steve.
Ambassador, I'm reading now the question. Thank you, Yazan. I'm reading now the question by Giulio, which is clearer. He's referring to the following. He says he noticed that in Arab states' capital cities and in Arab states' major cities, people feel a sense of belonging to the nation. But when he listened to you, he said, we said before that in traditional communities, so Giulio says, I assume in rural areas, small cities, they are more loyal to notions. Let me read here, I'm sorry.
I understand the question.
And of pre-Islamic tradition that do not conceive the state in the Western sense. My question would be, these two points of view, do they clash? Finally, last question, Rani, go ahead.
All right.
No, wait. Just let me answer this because I will forget it. What Julius said. It's important, a very good question. I couldn't, in my writing, I also put the theory of it. But what I call in dichotomy between myth and logos. So there are people that more, let's say, became less tribal and more statehood. Yes, but we are speaking about a very small part of the population, because the power of tradition, it's not rural, the power of tradition of family in the Arab world is much more stronger than other new ideas. It's more power even of Islam in someday, because Islam does not allow, for example, a blood revenge. But we know that the Arab world is full of blood revenge, because these were the law of tribals in order to survive. So what I'm saying is that look at Europe. Europe also was a place of tribes, of families, etc., etc. But there is 1,000 years of process, historical process of changing it. The Arab world has not been undergone through this process, because there was no secular revolution in the Arab world. There is no separation between religion and the state. I have a question to all of you, to Yazan, to Samara, to all other. Why there is no even one good university in all the Arab world? Why? The Arab are wise, are brilliant. The Muslim world was main of center of science during the medieval. What happened? We cannot all the time blame others in our faults. What happened? Why there is no even one quote of universities? One Arab university, I think, in the first 1,000 university in the world. Why? This is not a destiny from Allah. It depends on us. So this is for you, Giulio. This will be your indication. When you see that science become a major thing in our world, you'll see the change. Right now, there is difference in the attitude towards the word truth, and you cannot have a good research without freedom of research and freedom to think different in your society. Think about Galileo Galilei and the church, but it was 500 years ago. We did not have this now, till now, in the Arab world. We wish, we hope, I think that there is lots of potential, good potential for prosperity for all the world. But we need to be patient. Maybe not we, our children, not our children, descendants of our children, but one day we will have it.
Rani.
Yes, thank you very much. And Your Excellency, I truly enjoyed your presentation, but for now, I'd like to put aside our past and look towards the future together.
Rani,
we are neighboring.
Rani, where are you from? Where are you from?
Syria. Syria.
Syria.
Yep, from Damascus. So my question is, what future do you view for our region? How do you think we may be able to achieve peace? For us, peace to not be an ending to what's going on, but to be a new beginning for us to start working together. To how can we benefit each other? And do you think Israel might be willing to give the Golan in return for peace, or is this like a gone thing for Syria, for example? And of course, I fully understand the history behind the Golan, the wars over there. So I'd like to hear your perspective on it. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Rani, you also, as another, you're very cute. I appreciate. I hope to come again, maybe face to face, and to continue our conversation, because I think that you, Rani and Yazan and Samara and others, you are the future of this region. I believe in you. I think that you can be the future of this region. Now, you know that in the Arab tradition, there is a difference between salam and sulha. Salam, this is not what we call peace in the Western civilization. It's salam. It means we have a ceasefire. Sulha is different. Sulha means we forgot everything in the past, and now we are together. And the indication is that I can marry your daughter, you can marry mine. Never ever was spoken about sulha in the Middle East. This is also why the Europeans do not understand it. They speak about peace. The Arabs say, okay, peace, salam. No, sulha. So, the perspective. First of all, the perspective of the region. We have to be to understand, first of all, what you see. All the people in the Middle East, they have social network and modern communication, and they see the other world. And they ask themselves, why do we suffer while the other enjoy life? And this is the beginning of changing. Now, as I said, the attitude, approach towards the question of time in the Middle East is different. In the Middle East, time is not money. And if you have appointment, you can come 4 hours later. It doesn't mean that you do not respect the other place. And process in the Middle East takes lots of time. Think about the Jewish people. We were exiled in year of 70, and we established our state almost 2,000 years later. It takes time. But we see the beginning of questioning in the Middle East. We did not see, for example, a movement of Protestant movement in the Islam, although we had it in the Judaism and in Christianity. So it's also different. I can tell that we are living from little changes. And if we can contribute in information, in education, in goodwill, this will be the first thing. We have to strengthen the education. But education in terms of growing scientists, growing people that also think about their traditions in a critical way also. The Arab society in Arab countries major part do not accept criticism about Islam. Here in Israel, in the national TV, They laugh about all the religions, all Jewish religion. They laugh about Moses. They laugh about the Torah. We do not care because I know that this is also a joke, and our tradition is so strong. So, okay, so they joke. So they do not believe this, not believe other beliefs. But in the Muslim world, if you say something against Muhammad, it's a world war. And the problem is self-criticism. When you know how to criticize yourself, you can improve your life. So it starts from this. About the Golan hate, no chance. We live in the Golan hate more than Syria. Syria is a big country, huge country. And even this, they do not control in their place. Why do we have to give them a place that wasn't belong to them? And in a matter of fact, the Syrians attacked us, Yazan. The Syria attacked us first in 67 and in 73. So when you attack in the Middle East, there is a law. When you attack, you pay. You pay with land. This land belongs for Israel forever. And we flourish it. Very good. And if one day there will be a good government in Syria, I wish for them, we will be able to flourish the whole region. We do not need to pay for peace with us, because peace with us is a present. And if Syria does not want to have peace with us, it's their problem. But if they want, they will benefit a lot from it, etc., etc. So to conclude, I think that if we learn more about each other, maybe we can change, but change a little and little and little. This is what I don't know, I think that there is also a phrase in Arabic that say that hasty is from the Satan. You know this? That when you rush, it's from the Satan. Be patient, don't rush. So we are in front, in the beginning of very major historical process in the Middle East. I think that when Arabs will see the relation between us and the Emirates and the Bahrains and other, maybe they also want to change their ways. And if not, as the Italians say, purtroppo. In any case, I will be, this is what I urge all of you, not to look at the picture, but beneath the picture, to understand that what we see in the picture are symbols, and symbols has a hidden meaning that it is much more important than what we say openly.
Ambassador, please find time for one last quick interaction with Yazan again, that wants to say one more thing to you, and you reply to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, again. Thank you for your detailed answer a while ago. Using the same analogy again, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry. Using your analogy again, and what you've already said, the Jews themselves, after they left Palestine 2,000 years ago, they were divided all around Europe and all around the world, and yet they somehow managed to collect themselves and go to Palestine. But then the same thing happened with the Romans. At some point, it was the Great Roman Empire, and then it was divided into regions and countries and all those differences. And yet, even the Italians agreed that they still have roots to the Roman Empire. So using that analogy, then the Romans should have a claim to London.
No.
The second thing I would like to address is...
Wait. No. I told you, no. This is not a good analogy because the Italian are not the Roman Empire. Why do you keep saying it? It's not true. There is no connection between the Italian people and the Roman Empire. No connection, zero. Second, what do you mean the Jews were scattered? Jews will also remain in Israel. There were part that was scattered, part remain in Israel. And I said again, what's your connection to Jordan? What's your connection? How many years there was there in history a Jordanian people? I mean the Hashemite came from Hijaz, were given this huge country by the Great Britain to the grandfather of Hussein of this. What? So how can you compare? All the Western civilization is based on the Bible. So it's written in the Bible that in that land was only one kingdom, one state, a Jewish state, nothing else. So how can you compare it with other? No, there is nothing compared to it because even when we were outside, do you know, Yazan, you are a believer. I am a believer too. When you eat a bread, do you bless God?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Everyone in the world that believes bless God for the bread. Do you know that the Jews invented a patent, invented an innovation in their blessing? 2,000 years. Even now, open a prayer book, Hebrew, and look at it. It's written there in the blessing of the food. We thank you, God, for the food that you gave us. We thank you also for the land that you gave us. But don't forget to rebuild Jerusalem. Every day, every Jew that blessed for the food for thousands of years say, God, thanks for the food, but don't forget to rebuild Jerusalem. It means that our sages educate us that the same thing that we cannot live without food, without bread. Also, personally, nationality, from national point of view, the Jewish people cannot live without Jerusalem. So we never gave up. We told all the world, this land belonged to us. And actually, it didn't belong to any other. It was waiting for us. So in the Middle East, 99% were given lots of countries, 1% for the Jews in all the planet. And on this, we continue arguing. Why? Why don't we argue about your country, Jordan? We do not, because I don't have any interest to argue about it, because I have lots of good things, other things, important things to do. So there is no connection between the empire, Roman Empire, and other. The Roman Empire was erased the same that the Babylonian Empire was erased. You know that Saddam Hussein thought that he's continuing the Babylonian Empire, but it was nonsense. Nothing was left, only ruins. But the Jews left with their book, with their tradition, with their religion, with their country, everything. You know, even the Arabs in Israel kept all the names of the places, the Hebrew names, they kept it. Everywhere, they kept it. Ramallah is Ram Allah, is Bet El, etc., everything. I think this is also one of the proof that their roots were Jewish, because when a conqueror comes invade a place, he wants to change the names. They did not change. They kept it in Arabic, but Hebrew names that in the Bible. All of them. Why? Think about it. Think about you believe in God. How come the Jews survived and came back home according to the prophecy in the Bible? So why to fight against this and not to collaborate with this for the benefit of the world?
I would like to say the following, because obviously this is a fantastically interesting debate that will go on and on for a long time. First of all, I would like to thank profusely the global governance students, especially for this very interactive part of the event, not shying away from the debate and keeping it open for future discussions. Second of all, I would like to thank the ambassador, not only for his speech, very interesting, but for having stayed and also not shied away from a debate. What we have had today in global governance is something that is required all over the world. And I'm very, very proud that we have hosted an event where such different opinions were voiced in a very respectful way, and where we left each other certainly disagreeing, for some of us, but certainly one step closer to one another. So I thank again the ambassador. I thank all the GG students. I wish great opportunities for this global series of events, ambassador, that you have managed to organize and bring here at Tor Vergata. We will have other occasions to speak with very relevant and interesting speakers. So on behalf of all the global governance students, obviously of the vice president of the university that had to leave, I must say he lost a lot. I mean, this is the big problem with being a vice president, that you lose very, very interesting events and debates. Once again, Ambassador, thank you very much. And we will talk hopefully very soon and possibly have you in person so that you can meet all of our students in person.
Thank you very much, Professor Piga. Thank you very much, all of you, that you are the patient. We like to argue, we like to debate. This is a tradition of the Middle East, and it's a Jewish tradition also. Because if you read the Bible, you see lots of debate there. And if you read Talmud, you see that in any page in the Talmud, we have the Hegelian formulation of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis all the time, because we do not think that the whole truth is with ourselves. We hold only one part of the truth, and the other, if we meet in the middle, we can earn from it a lot, from understanding also the other different perspective. In any case, I wish all of you a good success, wish you a good, healthy year. I hope that you will be able to meet each other, and we are very yearning to hug each other, to touch each other. We understand now, we appreciate many things that we didn't think about it before. And I wish all of you to meet again, and I wish myself to come and visit you in your place, and we will continue our discussion. God bless you all, and have success in your life in general. Hope to meet all of you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Shalom.
See you soon.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, you talked about so many things that we are afraid to address.
Rani, I think he's left, but I must say, Yazan, Rani, very great comments, very good debate, very important.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this, truly. But I didn't get, he disrespected Jordan in so many ways. He called our royal family invaders. He literally said they're occupying Jordan. I mean, maybe the Israelis have a different sense of nationalism, but in the Arab world, the Arab kingdom started in Yemen and ended in Syria.
You know that I think he actually has answered to you very properly. You have phrased your question very properly. I think you've made one step closer to one another. I think it was extremely useful for all of us.
Thank you,
So
Professor.
I think you did a good job, and it was very interesting. So, you know, I mean, we've invited the ambassador of Iran, and when we have invited the ambassador of Iran, a lot